Hey, my name's AdrianaLaria, and this is my presentation for the Industrial Britain on Trial assignment. So, I'm on the prosecution side that British industrialization should be remembered as a net loss for humanity. Now, this isn't to say that industrialization was entirely bad, as it did make a lot of things become more efficient in our lives. However, the praise that it gets for removing slavery is pretty optimistic, and the so called conditions which form this so-called happy accident is only happy under a capitalist system which benefits the capitalists, and industrialization has just become unsustainable and the people and the environment are being destroyed and exploited by it. So I'm going to read a quote by Malachi Postlethwaite, an economist from 1746, and he says, "If we have no slaves, we have no sugar, tobacco, rum, etc. Consequently, the public revenue arising from importation of plantation produce will be wiped out, and hundreds and thousands of Britons making good for the triangular trade will lose their jobs and go a begging." We have to mention how important of a role slavery had in the funding of industrialization, as without them, there would be no food or profit for British people, as Malachi mentions. And it's not as if slavery was removed in a single day, and it definitely was not removed in its entirety as well. We still find slavery today, just under different circumstances and different names. The move from slavery was also not a moral decision, as many people like to mention. It was entirely profit driven. We also have to remember that even with the uprising of these machines that could replace human labor, there still also need to be workers to maintain and run these new machines. And workers back then weren't paid that much more, and they had longer days of work, less safety, and overall just less rights and regulations that workers have continued to fight for and are still fighting for better regulations today. So back then it was, and still now, profits and efficiency were always put over the people. And while we may not call it slavery, it's definitely still exploitation and it's still present. Industrialization overall has just made things new and exciting, and the excitement back then was definitely being tested as more and more people came to realize that they were being exploited. Now I'm going to read a quote from the Western Civilization textbook. It says, "Industrialization does not simply consist of mechanization. It consisted of and required simultaneous growth in commerce, population, and agricultural production." So it's true that the conditions that Britain faced created this perfect storm. Without the influence of capitalism, maybe we would have had industrialization become something new and different that could benefit everyone else. But because everything was about having power and money, industrialization became more about making the most for the least and the cheapest for the amount of time that they were spending on it, rather than being able to provide what was necessary. And we can see today and in the past century just how much industrialization has consumed and smothered the planet as well. If industrialization were truly a happy accident, then everyone around the world would be benefiting from it. But it's truly only made a majority of our lives more and more complicated. It's always about blaming the consumers and the workers and never about the 1% that controls the production, because it's always been profits over people. Now I'm going to read a quote from biophysicist Donella, and she says that, "I believe that wasting energy, emitting greenhouse gases, buying and discarding stuff mindlessly is as immoral as keeping slaves. Yet I drive a car and I fly on planes. Mountains of chewed up trees flow through my life in the form of paper." Now, the conditions for innovation back then were fueled to defend a country and save it from decimation. But with industrialization, the world got more and more innovative in all sectors. Yet the one that continued to have the most priority was always for the creation of mass weapons of destruction. How ironic is that? And the ones who have always ended up paying for it have been the people, the ones who end up working tirelessly just to get by. Industrialization under capitalism has just encouraged privatization and competition between everyone. Private companies and factories have always pushed their faults onto the consumers, especially when it comes to the environment and how we the people have to take care of it, and we never put the blame on these companies. And it ends up having people feel guilty for having to participate in the system, especially as Dontel mentions in her own words, it feels like just as immoral as owning slaves back then. It's almost inevitable. And if industrialization were planned and controlled by the masses, I truly believe that we would be in a very different position for the well being of the earth and all the people around the world. So, I just want to talk a little bit about the other side of this argument. And to reiterate, industrialization has advanced our world at a rapid pace. And in a short amount of time, we have made our lives, again, much more efficient. But it's come at the expense and exploitation of our freedom and our environment. We've been convinced to accept that this is how the world should work. But with each advancement under our current system, the more the 99% of people lose, and the more the 1% gains. Industrialization should have been something that could benefit all people. And under Queen Victoria's rule, industrialization was unregulated simply because it was profit driven and instead of improving the quality of everyone's lives. So, with all this evidence, to me, it's clear that even with all the technological advances industrialization has brought to the world and it has also brought destruction because of its unsustainable values. There are great lessons to learn about the industrial revolution, but if we continue to commemorate it as though it's not actively harming us as a collective, then we will continue to go down a vicious cycle of exploitation. So I hope you enjoyed listening to my presentation.